welcome to Lead Line, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire.
Hello, hello, hello. It's an honor to be here with Dr. Kwende. Again, we get together monthly to focus on the wealth equation. And I'm going to turn it over to him and have him describe in brief what the wealth equation is.
Good afternoon, Dr. Webb. How are you?
Good afternoon. I am well. How are you?
Awesome. I'm excited to be here always. Yep. So, welcome everyone. We've been talking about the wealth equation for some time right now, right? And obviously, I understand that everyone desires to be wealthy in some way, right? But what's wealth? In fact, I was asked that question actually this morning, and I don't really care where you are in the world. It's probably the same thing. I know most people think about it just about having money, but it's really about, in our opinion, five things. We call them the five F's. It's about faith, family, finance, fitness, and fun. Let me say that again. Five F's: faith, family, finance, fitness, and fun. Bottom line is that what we want to have balance in those different areas of our lives, right? There are a lot of people that have a lot of money, finance, which is what most people think about wealth. Most of those people might not be happy, they're not healthy. You have people that have a lot of money, they commit suicides and stuff like that. That's not wealth. To become wealthy, you need to have balance in life. That's our definition of wealth, right? So that's what we talk about every day. How do you create balance in your life in all those key areas of your life? That's wealth.
Got it. You got it. And so our topic today is, are our investments enhancing our families? This is very personal for Dr. Kwende and I. And before we go into some of the details, and we're really going to be transparent, as we always are, even about our own families, our own investments in support of our families. So as we focus on this topic, are our investments enhancing our families? I want to show you this visual and have you think about it as you see it. And this visual is really about what we believe fundamentally, right, Dr. Kwende, that we should do in order to invest fully in our families. And I'm going to go through this very quickly, and Dr. Kwende and I are going to talk about this and go very deep pretty quickly. And overall, we want people to be thinking about planning for success in their life and not waiting until they're my age is 63, or a colleague of mine who retired many years ago and he's in his 80s. Wait, starting where you're at, whether you're 40, you're 25, whatever your age, and literally asking yourself, what is life success planning? Well, we believe fundamentally it includes at least these five key areas. Legacy planning. Some people think, oh, I got to do that later on. No, 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 no. Stop. Slow down. Be thinking more about what is your grand vision for your life and how do you achieve that grand vision? That's really legacy. Is it for your family or do you even have a family yet? And then how do you build that legacy uh, in terms of the assets you need to actualize it? And the legacy is only when you're living, it's when you've transitioned. People can look back and say, "Oh my goodness, that individual did this, and the impact was that." And we're all beneficiaries. That's what we're talking about. And then retirement planning, securing your assets now so that you can go into retirement and not worry about, as Dr. Kwende more beautifully conveys, not worry about having to go back to work after you've retired because you didn't plan for a legacy. You didn't plan to have the assets that allows you to spend the rest of your life, whether it's 20 years, 30 years, or 40 years. We have a colleague whose mother was diagnosed with cancer. I know she won't mind us sharing it. And she was told she was going to die because she had stage 4 cancer. And so she was preparing her children often for death. The woman lived 40 years and she didn't even die of the cancer. She may be in the background and share a little bit of that in questions or comments. So long-term care planning is critical. That example demonstrates that. It's safeguarding your well-being and safeguarding the family who would otherwise have to take care of you, whether you're 25, you're 40, you're 60, you're 80. We expect long-term planning, care planning in our later age years, but we don't expect it in our earlier years. And yet we have too many examples, Dr. Kwende and I, of individuals who didn't make it to 30 and they had to deal with long-term planning. I know some folks who didn't make it to 10 and their family had to deal with long-term planning. I remember one in particular. The child was only 5. It didn't even make sense. This beautiful child. And so now is when we think about legacy. Now is when we think about retirement. Now is when we think about long-term care. And of course, anything that will enable our young people, ourselves, to be educated in a formal way and informal way so that we can do what? We can build our lives, build the next generation. And then, of course, you have to have financial planning. And short of understanding how to plan your finances to ensure the right kinds of things that we're going to talk about, you will not likely be able to sustain the first 4 of those. Your initial thoughts, Dr. Kwende.
I mean, I really like this quick summary because it really touches on all the key elements of what we do when it comes to building wealth, right? Legacy planning, what you're going to leave behind, retirement planning, how you live your life, the last end of your life, long-term care, just in case, that's what I call it, right? Something happens, right? College planning. Most people think about college like just going to school. In this case, it's what do you leave to the kids, right? What kind of financial future you leave for them? And obviously, financial planning is kind of what this is really all about, right? But you can't plan something you don't even understand. So part of our goal is what? Financial education or empowerment. Once you understand the concepts, then you're able to ask the right questions and put the right plans in place. That's essentially what we're working on all the time.
Yeah, I'd like us to start off talking a little bit about ourselves so that people understand why this is important to us, why we're so invested. I'll kick it off, and this is really a discussion, folks. So bear with us because we both are passionate about this, and we have a level of intensity that's a little bit off the chart sometimes. I know it is inspiring, but and I should say. Here it is. I am fortunate. I have family that are blood relatives. I have family that are a result of my being in foster care. I have family that people I've met along the way and I took on as family members. I am extremely fortunate. And that part of the wealth equation, oh my goodness, I am wealthier than I have certainly have even thought about. I have in excess of 50 nieces and nephews. Can you imagine that? I'm thinking about one niece who has 7 kids. I'm thinking about another niece who has 5 kids, another with 4. My goodness. And my nephews. Oh my God, a nephew with his beautiful wife has 4. Another nephew has 2. I just think about these nieces and nephews who are building families, let alone my brothers and sisters who enabled me to have those nieces and nephews. I'm extremely blessed. And when I think about my life, I think about my day-to-day activities. It's hard for me not to think about so many of them. And in one day, I'm thinking about them and I'm thinking about godchildren. It's like, oh my goodness, I have no, and so I automatically have a smile on my face. And people are like, you're always smiling. They have no idea. I have all the reasons to smile. Even when I'm dealing with challenges, they're like, you never even look like you have difficulties. I have major difficulties, but I typically immediately think about one of those many or a combination of them. And all of a sudden I have the pickup to go take care of business. Why? Because at the end of the day, when I'm no longer here, they don't have to remember my name. None of them. They likely will, but they don't have to. I want them to know that they have the foundation to ensure that they're successful because of the work that I did while I'm present. That's what legacy is all about for me. And it's not just those I love, I care about, I think about, I hold close, whether they're friends, extended family members, etc. It's also the rest of humanity, because I firmly believe that we're all one. Yes, I understand. I'm Black. Dr. Kwende is Black. I'm also Native American. I'm also Latina. I'm also who knows all the other stuff I am. I know that I'm over here, you're over there. I know that there's billions of people on this planet. And I know that I may not meet over 90% of them in my lifetime. They may not even know of me in my lifetime. However, I do understand that without exception, every one of us, independent of where we're at, why we're where we're at, we're affecting the other. And the degree to which we function with a level of health and well being, we spread that, we inspire that, we help to ensure that. And the inverse is true too. So that's when I say we're all one. And so my aspiration is to ensure that as many people can hear my voice, who can experience the teams of folks with whom I've worked over the last 40, almost 50 years, that they get to experience the brilliance that I got to experience paid forward. That's what life is about. That's why we do this a wealth equation. We're not getting paid. In fact, our services we provide complimentary. We do this because we want you to experience the magnificence of life. And you can when you experience financial freedom and you build and sustain intergenerational wealth. Dr. Kwende?
And that's very well put. I mean, obviously, for me growing up, I didn't, probably heard my story before. I didn't have a father. I didn't know my father per se. So I've always kind of struggled how to create a legacy, because I don't feel that one was passed on to me, at least if I look from a father perspective. And then, my mom passed away when I was 16 years old. And so, yes, I have older siblings. I'm the youngest of 8, but I always still struggle in my mind, right? How to kind of be the right parent to my kids. Obviously, living a legacy, creating a different financial experience, creating a different experience for their faith, right? For their health, for their fitness was key to me. And the only way I could do that is try to understand how to create time, right? And we asked the question today: are our investment enhancing our families? Basically, in my mind, we have one main asset: time, right? We take time and we convert it into money. That's when we have a job, right? But when you take time, convert it into money, that's called income, right? When you do that, you're gonna have to have a lifestyle yourself. That's your living expenses, your mortgage, your food, right? Then what is left is called savings, right? So how do you become wealthy? You put your income, you make more income, and you have your savings make more money for you. That's it. So question is your income and your savings, which is that you converted your time into those two, is that enhancing your family? And for me, one of the things that I love about what I get to do right now is even though I own a business, educating people about money, I love the fact that every day of the week, I spend about 4 hours sitting in my car to allow my 2 boys to go play soccer that they love. Right? So I'm using my time the way I like, because my investments, the time that I put in the past is already leveraged enough that I can afford to sit in my car and allow my kids to experience the life that they want. And not only that, even sitting in my car, I can still continue to make an impact. Right? So that's kind of what we're talking about. It's not just about is your money making more money for you? It's more than that. Right? Because money comes from time to start with. We trade time for money, and then we can make the money do more stuff. That's building wealth in a nutshell. Right? So when we talk about the wealth equation, that's exactly all it is. Income minus lifestyle equals savings. What do you do with your income and your savings? That's what it's all about. And overall, what kind of lifestyle do you generate out of that?
I am resting with that. because I think it's very powerful for people to hear it in such simplistic terms. I don't think a lot of us think about our time. And I want to acknowledge Jerry. What does he write? He says, "You both have so much knowledge, education, experience that you're sharing with the community. Thank you for paying it forward." Jerry, we just compliment you. Thank you for doing the same thing. When we get to just live our lives the way we want, and that's what we're really saying, folks. Your time is yours. You're choosing, even if you believe you have to, you're choosing to use it in a certain way. So back up and ask the question, is the way you're using it optimal? Or even is it complementary? Does it allow you to live your passion? And so at time you invest, whether it's in your own business, like Dr. Kwende and I, or it is in someone else's business, like the vast majority of us. Neither one are inherently more better than the other. They're just different. So the question is, do you have the time when you invest in someone else's business to honor your family? If you do, that's awesome. And are you looking at the discrete areas where investment is so critical to sustain and to elevate that family? That's so critical. If you're doing it, that is awesome. And for those of us who are just beginning to think about it, that's powerful. So we want you to be thinking about a few questions. So the first question is, what are some investment people possess? Think about that. What do you possess in terms of investments? What comes to mind, Dr. Kwende?
I mean, for most of us, when we have a job and we start working, typically there are things that we're supposed to have, very basic financial vehicles. So have a bank account, right? If you have a good company that might offer you a 401k, then typically most people are supposed to do what? Probably put some money in a brokerage account. So you can buy some stocks, mutual funds, cryptocurrency, whatever. But you're supposed to have those three main basic financial vehicles, right? A bank account, 401k with tax deferred account, maybe an IRA, and then you want to put some money in a brokerage account. Typically, that's what most people have.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe some real estate, right? Because that's most I have my
Mm-hmm.
home. Yeah. So in a nutshell, that's what I think it comes to mind for most people.
Mm-hmm. And then some people who are just love things, collect what? Antique furniture that has value and that will hold its value, hopefully. Some people collect art. I love art. That and some people collect it because they can, and then only to find out later on, especially their beneficiaries, that oh my God, this piece that their parent had over in the corner that looked like it had a bunch of dust is now worth 50,000, or even more extraordinary, $1 million. They're like, what? That piece of so there are all these different assets. And the reason why I bring that up as an example is not only should we take an inventory of our assets, and we can tell you so many remarkable stories of people we know and people we learn to know as clients who've never taken inventory of the assets. They just gather this plan, this policy, this tool, this whatever. And when they take an inventory, which is always what we ask them to do because we are financial educators, we want them to plan. We're financial educators, almost without exception. The folks with whom I've worked are like, oh my God, I didn't realize what I had, and in relationship to my goal, which I encourage them to focus in on. What are your goals as it relates to those discrete areas we showed you earlier? And we'll show you again before the end of this broadcast, thanks to Jet. And that is, if you understand what your goal is, then you inventory what your assets are in relationship to achieving your goal, then you can have a sense of your gap, right? And then you can leverage folks like Dr. Kwende and I to do a helpful assessment of that and look at different instruments to help you understand how to fill that gap, feel it. And it may be when you've done the inventory, you find, oh my God, I have what I need. As one of my clients did, who said, wow, she's on the East Coast of the United States. And she goes, I thought I didn't have what I needed. She's in her 70s. She's like, oh my, this is exact. I just needed to make this course correction, and the stress went away. Knowledge really is instrumental to your overall, to all of our overall success in creating that life success plan. Tomoko writes, why do people typically think about investment in a monetary sense? How can we help change the paradigm around investing and how one can build their future? Good question. You want to take that first, Dr. Kwende? I'll leave it
Yeah,
up.
sure. By the way, Tomoko, thanks for for that question. Um, the bottom line is, we typically follow what the society says that we should follow, right? And I think that's why one of the series that we did was what owning your perspective, because a lot of us base our judgment just by listening to other people rather than looking at the foundational information and making the judgments ourselves, right? So this concept that people think about investment just in the monetary sense is the way that the system says it, right? But when you really understand it, everything starts from the time that we all have. And guess what? All of us have the exact same amount of time, 24 hours a day. So then you ask yourself, how come some people are financially way better than others? How come some people have a lot more time to spend with their families, right? How come some people can always go on vacation anytime they want, right? It really boils down to the key word that we have to do is called planning. That means you have to think ahead, right? You have to kind of look at, okay, where am I right now and where do I want to be? That's why having a goal is important, having a vision. Where do I like to be? And where do I want to be? Where am I right now? It's like a navigation system. You need to know where you are to figure out where you want to go.
I want to give an example I think we've given before, but I want people to know that there's an instrument, for example, we're not going to go into details here. If you want details, contact us. There's an instrument that you can get for your child. Your child's 1-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, and you can just literally set aside over time 28,000 max in an instrument. By the time that child, and don't touch it, or you could even maybe touch a little bit of it. But let me tell you, by the time that child is 61, that child will have over $1 million. Most folks don't know that. Most folks are putting away 28,000 over here in the bank and hoping they get a great rate of return. Well, banks are important places to protect your money. That's not to be negated. But let's just say if your bank is not giving you, your money is not earning more than the actual rate of inflation. Last month alone, it was, what was it? July, rather, it was 5%. The month before was 4.2%. If the bank is only setting aside less than 1%, you're losing money. If you put your money for your child, for your grandchild, for your niece, for your nephew, for your godchild into an instrument that's going to compound in a way that when they're 60, they don't have to touch it. They have $1 million. That's what we're talking about, folks, now. And we're not saying wait until 10 years later. The time to leverage is now. Time, you'll hear from us all the time. Time to act strategically always is now. We don't have yesterday. It's not guaranteed. And excuse me, yesterday is gone. We don't have tomorrow. It's not guaranteed. We plan for tomorrow. We live now in the presence. And that's why a lot of people say the present is, in fact, indeed a real present. It's a gift to us when we leverage it. So Tomoko's questions about paradigms make me think about a question that we had, Dr. Kwende. Why do you think many folks are unfamiliar with the rules of money, for example? We can go spend literally 3 hours on just the rules of money. And we're not going to do that here. We're going to answer that question. You've already mentioned the lack of exposure.
Yeah. But what is kind of amazing, Dr. Webb, is that, I ask everyone, is there anyone that is allergic to wealth? And the answer is typically no. And I'm like, okay, everyone desires to be wealthy. But if I want to become a pharmacist, there are pharmacy schools, right? If I want to become a doctor, there's medical school. I want to be a nurse, there's a nursing school. Guess what? If you want to become wealthy, what kind of school do you go to? It doesn't exist. So guess what? I'm not surprised why most people don't know anything about money. Because as a society, it's not something that we like to talk about. I don't know whether it's because most of us don't have it or we think we can have it.
And it's really interesting because what's praised and taught a lot is that the wealthy don't talk about money, they talk about ideals and ideas, and that's powerful. The poor talk about money a lot. Why? Because poor
They don't have it.
don't have money. And what if we shifted things and we just made information about the rules of money ubiquitous, where you don't have to think about it? And we amplify the power of ideals and ideas. Oh my goodness, what kind of society, what kind of planet will we be living in? I would say thriving on, because there's now an intelligence out there that's widespread, that's everyone has access to, that helps them understand in order to go from wherever we've historically been in terms of the legacy of our in particular family or village or neighborhood or community or society to where we want to be, we use these basic fundamental principles. They're tried and true. The wealthy use them all the time. It's like the back of their hand. They already know what it looks like. It's basic. The vast majority of us have no clue. And it's available in plain sight. And that's the powerful thing, right? To have something that's accessible to all of us. And yet, because we're not programmed, we're not socialized, we're not formally educated, we're not, or in fact, there's enough messaging that intentionally de incentivizes us to go there, right? To encourage ignorance. So, how do we break out of that? That's why we have this discussion, the wealth equation.
Dr. Webb, do you know that before you and I started doing this, for example, just for me personally, I've never really seen something that people get educated specifically to be wealthy or think about wealth in that way. Like seriously, I'm thinking even now as I'm talking, I'm thinking like, how is it possible that as a society we don't actively talk about just understanding the basics of money? Why should this even be something that we have to be doing it on the side? Everyone should be learning this in school. I mean, think about the society where everyone is just allowed to grow up and drive a car, but they don't have to take any classes.
Or a license is not required.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yes.
just think about that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
What would that look like?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And yet, there are a number of things that we facilitate society wide or worldwide that it's at odds with what we would deem would be smart.
Yeah.
We don't have a handbook nor training or support for people who become parents. And we hope people get it. And we
Yeah.
hope they love and they care, and their care is unconditional, and it really edifies the the essence of that child, so that that child grows into an adult that is able to edify everyone and everything around it because of the love that's unconditional that was poured into them. And yet that doesn't happen. There's some fundamental things that we intuitively understand we should have, but we don't. Um, we expect to go through rigorous process when we're hired for a role. Not always, but most of the time that is the case. Hopefully, it has internal integrity associated with it. It's sound, and then we secure the role. But when it comes to moving away with the income that we receive, or if we're running a business, the revenue we generate, are there any kind of parameters that says, here are some of the most effective practices? Well, the good news, there's a lot of stuff online. The challenging and the bad news, a lot of stuff online is not accurate, right? And so the question is how, in a regimented way, get access to what's going to help you move forward. You want to speak to that a bit?
Yeah. And this is the importance of why we do what we do, why financial literacy is very, very important. And the fact that the system doesn't have it in a structured way, like going to a basic school, what we do right now, the business that we do, becomes critically important. The challenge, though, is that a lot of people don't take the time or show the interest to learn about their money. However, when we go to the bank every day, we put our money, we place our money with the bank. Guess what? The bank is replacing our money in their favor. Okay. So
Business.
yeah, what we're talking about is not like you have to do anything crazy. You just have to understand how to place your money correctly for yourself, for your benefit, not for the system's benefit. That's all that we're saying. It's not about making more money. Most of us make enough money to be wealthy and we're still broke.
Point. That's word. That's why I gave that example of someone amassing 28,000 for their child. Only 28,000.
Yeah.
And ensuring that that child by the age of 61 has enough money to move into retirement. But that
Yeah.
child ideally is reared in a way where he or she is a go-getter, like your children, like many of my nieces and nephews and godchildren, where you get out of the way, you've given them the foundation, now they're taking off. And they can add to that wealth and they can build on it for the next generation, for their own children. And then you pay it forward so that the next generation does it for the subsequent generation. And before you know it, a community that's considered to be not poor, lacking in resources has shifted and it's become vibrant. Right? Why? Because the right information is there. If you are in a food desert, guess what? You're going to be buying stuff that's probably going to be very healthy, deleterious to the well-being of your body, the temple in which our spirits reside. So if you can't get out of that food desert, then go places where the food is high quality. Buy only that so that you begin to nourish and build yourself. We're talking about the same thing in terms of finances. Leverage us, leverage, leverage organizations, individuals that are about your ultimate well-being. And Jerry writes, the education system does not teach this in schools or colleges, exclamation mark. Emphasis added. My opinion, it's not uh, enough for, it's not enough for a reason.
It's
Or
not
it's not
taught.
taught, excuse me, it's not taught for a reason. If I just read what's there, it's not taught for a reason. You want to speak to that? Because I firmly agree. And I am a longtime educator, 40, almost 40 years in higher education. Go for it.
Right. So I was actually, before he said that, I was going to ask you, Dr. Webb, think about how much time and effort and dedication you put into getting to where you got to in your regular life. Right? I put about the same amount of time to get to where I got to. In fact, at the age of 25, I had a PhD already. And then I worked for another 20 years, right? So by age, what? This is crazy. So 25 plus 20, that's 45. I put in almost probably half of my life, and I didn't go anywhere very far. But this is the crazy part. Everything that I achieved in that time frame is not directly transferable to my family. The pieces of paper that I got as soon as
Let's slow down because that's really the core. A lot that I'm going to say most, you said everything, but most of what you accumulate to that point was not transferable to your family. What do you mean by that? People need to hear this.
Right. I have a bachelor's degree in physics. I have an MBA. I have a PhD. Those are the three key things that I normally would say that I achieved, right? Um, those pieces of paper, I cannot put my kids' names on it and it means anything for them.
Mhm.
When I check out, it's gone. It's done. All the time that I put in the IP, intellectual property that I developed while I worked, is owned by the companies. All of my efforts mainly compounded for the benefit of the companies that I work for.
Mhm.
In that 20 years that I worked, is the truth.
Mhm.
And right now, I took about 7 days to get a financial license. And in the last 7 years, what I've built can sustain my family for generations. It's kind of crazy, but it's the truth.
I know it's true. I know a great deal of what you've generated that in numerical terms. I know a great deal that you created in qualitative, life altering terms. So, folks, we're not just talking about money, as Dr. Kwende said, although money is a means in order to achieve the kinds of things that we illuminated at the front end of this broadcast. It's about how you leverage your time, and it's about how you build the assets to allow your children, your other family members, the community to be able to use the time as they choose to do other things. Whether it's taking their kids to soccer, to classic American football, to basketball, to dance, to whatever, to climbing a mountain, to experiencing camping for the first time. You're able to just decompress and give in a loving and fun way because what? You paid attention to your time and you paid attention to how you used the income to generate savings and had that savings work in order to create the financial wherewithal to support all the other areas. And when you say move into the subsequent generations, you weren't just talking about for your children and their children. You're talking about subsequent generations, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's the power of what we do. That's if the plan that you were talking about, you set up a basic plan. You talk about 28,000, but I have an illustration that I did just to show someone. For a 5 year, we put it on 50,000. They actually take out the 150 for college already, but it still leaves them over $1.5 million in income, and they can potentially leave back another 1.2 million. So that's what, close to $2.8 million of wealth from like 150. That's kind of crazy. That's
Oh,
the
wait,
amount of,
let's slow down because I just want to make certain it's understood. You're saying from $150,000 investment. What again?
so you already take out the 150 towards college because that's the purpose of
Yes.
the
Okay,
first
got
thing.
it.
And then the child takes out another like $1.5 million tax free for their own retirement. And when they check out, they leave $1.2 million for your grandkids, just as numbers that you can project from the value of putting 150,000. Now, the crazy part is that if you don't understand the system and you put the same 150,000, the bank, another company could take that money and place it correctly. They keep the $2.7 million and you get 150.
Word.
And that's why I was saying that we most of us with all the education we have, all the money we make right now, we have enough capital to be wealthy. But because we don't understand the system, we don't place that money correctly. That's the point about our investment enhancing our families now and into the future. We make enough to have the right outcome, but we don't place it correctly. Then you don't get the outcome. But guess what? The person that knows the system gets that outcome on your behalf. And they say, thank you very much for being a dummy.
Yeah. And we laugh, but it's a serious reality.
Yeah.
And our laughter is really about humbleness. Like, really, we want you to get this. The fundamentals of money, everyone should know. Why? Not independent of their ultimate vision for their life, everyone should know. Why? Because everyone deserves the right to experience fully the wealth equation: faith, family, fitness, fun, and at the core, a financial foundation. So we have another question. Why do people need to know about investments? And we're going to answer that in a second after we capture another statement by Jerry. Society programs us to go to school, get a job, pay taxes, and save for retirement in a 401k account that will get taxed. How is this considered a good plan? You just hit the nail on the head, Jerry. Most people don't know that if you have 100,000 in your 401k, and if you start removing it before you're 59 and a half, you're going to experience a 10% penalty. Not only that, you're going to be taxed at the federal level at what, 25, 30, or 35%, depending upon your tax level, level. And if you're in a state like California, you're going to be taxed further, 10%. So what, at 100,000 is really 50,000. For those of you who are alarmed, I know. Most people, we show that to them. We don't just tell them. We use their numbers and show them. They're like, oh my God, I thought I had $1 million. I really only have 600,000 at best. And if I take it out too late, because I don't need it, I'm 72, I'm going to be penalized 50% by the IRS. What? I thought this was my money. No, it's a governmental issued resource to help who? The government, and hopefully you too. But who earned it? You did. Okay, so that's powerful. That is so powerful. Anything you want to add to that, Dr. Kwende?
That's always interesting because this morning I was answering this exact same question. Someone's like, "What's a 401k?" I was like, "Well, one of the things that they tell you to do certain things, like, hey, we're gonna match." I was like, okay, and this is the part that people need to understand. If somebody's telling you to do something, there has to be benefit in it for them.
Absolutely.
Okay? You have to understand that too. If I tell you something right now, there might be a benefit for me. I'm not denying that, but you have to understand what is the benefit for you. Okay. Now, somebody says put money in an account, we're going to match it. Let's say they match it 50-50, just so you understand what's going on. So they give you 50-50 match. So there are two of you contributing. You put 50, they put 50%, 100%. What if I told you that at the time you try to take the money out of that account, you're going to split it 4 ways? 4 people are going to get interest in the money. And you ask me how? There's going to be you, obviously. There's the company that you work for, because if they put money in that account, if you don't vest, they keep it. So that way of getting their benefit out of that account, right? And then there's the company that holds your money. Fidelity, Vanguard, they don't work for free. Does that make sense? And then there's Uncle Sam with all the rules that Dr. Webb just told you. This is even the sad part. Do you know that in that account, Uncle Sam can decide exactly what percent they want? And you can't take them to court because they run the courts too. And then the company that holds your money can decide how much they're going to get. And they don't negotiate with you because they didn't even ask you before they set it up. Right? What kind of plan is that?
And the businesses get a tax write-off by offering this.
That's what I'm saying. Which is what they do. But I'm just saying, in your mind, if someone says, oh, we're going to match you 50-50 for 2 people putting in, but there are 4 people getting out, how is that a match?
Yeah, exactly.
So you have to think about the stuff when people tell you, and this is why we're bringing this awareness about the wealth equation, is to empower you to ask the right questions.
Yeah.
So you can get better outcomes. That's all that it is.
And we value whatever resource you can go to. If you have a financial planner, require that they educate you. If they don't know, make certain you leverage us or someone else who will educate you. We don't profess to be, we don't desire to be financial planners. We want you to be planning. We want to educate you so that you don't even have to think about it. It's not a big deal. You are so well on the front end. It may be confusing, like, like one of my wonderful loves and colleagues and clients is a musician. And so she thinks music. That's who she is. And she's like, I don't understand spreadsheets. This woman's brilliant, first of all. but she's brilliant in the area of music and much, much more with people, etc. And yet she doesn't want to know all the details. We give her the details. And before she knows it, she's speaking in the language. She doesn't think she is. I don't sweat it. I don't tell her she is, but she's speaking in the language. And that's what we want. We want you to be sufficiently knowledgeable. So when someone says something, even us, you ask the question, whoa, wait, what do you mean by that? Ah, well, that relates to this. Oh, that's how I can leverage that. Or that's what we want, folks. We understand that investment is important for what? We want you to be protected. We want you to understand growth. We want you to understand and the various types of ways growth occurs. We want you to understand that having a kind of I got to make money tomorrow might predispose you to certain instruments that will actually sabotage your current savings, right, Dr. Kwende?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's, once you understand the game, then you have a shot at winning. For most of us, our challenge is that the financial game, we don't know the rules to the game. And so the system doesn't necessarily see the need to teach you the rules because that's how they make the money, right? By having people that don't know the rules. And in my mind, when I think about some of the financial vehicles that we have, how powerful they are, it's kind of shocking that everyone doesn't have one. But I think I kind of figured out what the problem is. I think that most people that typically do financial stuff are not really interested in spending time explaining stuff to you and I. Because that's not what they went there for. They went there to make some money. So they're not very good at explaining the stuff. But right now, I mean, Dr. Wade, think about your experience, your knowledge base. For you to come and explain the basic things about money, man, it's game changer. That's the truth. That's what I know. That's why I'm very excited about what's going on right now. For the first time, smart people are starting to do money. Those basic money concepts are going to be explained correctly. Guess what? The entire community is going to be raised up. Because more people are going to start understanding what they did not know, so they can start putting their lives in a better place.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's the remarkable end benefit or the end goals of enhancing our families through investments? You talked about it in terms of your own personal family, but more broadly, what's the benefit of investing to enhance our families?
Well, the truth is, I'm hoping that, when I check out, that someone's going to remember that I made a difference. All my great grandkids are going to remember my name, right? Because I don't remember the names of my father, my grandpa, on my father's side, because they didn't leave me anything, right? But that also means what? That also means that our communities can be better. Somebody was asking me a question just this morning about GoFundMe, and I was kind of like pondering about that. I'm like, do you understand that every time we do GoFundMe, guess what we just did? We just gave some money to the funeral homes. We gave it to the airlines. But guess what we didn't give any money to? To the kids of the deceased. Right? So we impoverish the entire community by not understanding how the system works. For the exact same money, with a little bit of knowledge, we could have millions of dollars poured into the community.
Yes. 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 It's all about what is the bottom line. And it's really interesting. I want to acknowledge this comment that Jerry has. Everyone needs to know they have choices other than government retirement programs. Thank you, Dr. Webb and Dr. Kwende, for sharing our honor. And thank you for the kinds of questions and statements you make that prompt us in certain directions. Uncle Sam loves 401k. IRS can literally predict how much they will have in tax revenue every year from retirees every year. Guaranteed money for the government each and every year. It's not a retirement plan, it's a money making plan for IRS with corporations getting benefits for playing the IRS game. And let's also be clear. We are citizens of this country. We love the United States. We're also perceived ourselves as citizens of the world, more broadly. But in terms of the US, the government has to have resources to sustain aspects of the infrastructure, whatever that infrastructure is. And we're also mindful whether we agree with activities of this administration or any other administration, previous or subsequent administration. The bottom line is when we think more strategically, like Dr. Kwende is talking about, Jerry's talking about, I'm talking about, we can literally, with the same kind of investments that was flowed out last year and during COVID, because some of us have done the math, literally those same families could be, as Dr. Kwende conveyed, could be very well set for the rest of their lives financially. It's all a question of priorities. What is our real priorities? And sometimes we're so busy in the weed. I don't care if it's an elected politician. I don't care how brilliant they are. I don't care how wealthy they are. Many of them are very wealthy. They got wealthy in office because of their connections, et cetera, and hopefully all legal dealings. But the bottom line, when you're so rapid and ratchet around political this, political that, and attacks and issues and et cetera, you tend to not even be visionary. You tend not to even step back and look at the big picture. There are forests out there. They're not just trees and streams and interesting critters that are other kinds of critters like us out there roaming, the forests and the streams. Literally, if we look at that big series of the context, and then if we just did the math before we, without much consideration, before we took a policy stance and said, what's our vision for the country? And we do this in all countries. What do we want at the end of the day for all youth? What do we want for all families? What do we want for every community? Well, how do we use the policies? How do we use the resources we have to create that end? All of a sudden, things will change like that. Doesn't mean that all the results will be achieved that quickly. Literally, we'll begin to change the paradigm that we function in from what it is now to something qualitatively different. And the notion of whether we call it peace, resolution of conflicts, etc. If we're about that end, we can achieve it. But we have to choose a vision that's shared that gets us there. So you're so on. And yes, I love America, just like you, Jerry. And we need to be absolutely thoughtful, not only at the personal level that Dr. Kwende and I are talking about, that actually pays itself forward and goes out, right? We need to be thoughtful at the global level. What do you say? Because I know that you and I are about that big picture.
Exactly. I mean, if we empower our communities, we empower our families, shouldn't we be less dependent on the system? Right? If we make sure that most families can take care of themselves, that they have the right protections in place, shouldn't we need government support less? So it's actually empowering for the community, for individuals to be empowered financially. It is. So I love the US as well, United States for sure. It gives me an opportunity that I've never had anywhere else. For that reason, that's why I want to make a difference. Right? It's out of love for this amazing country that I do what I do, but that I can even do what I do right now.
You got it. And what is Tomoko right? She says, many people have expressed that they are not as financially knowledgeable as they would like. They are also afraid they're making the wrong financial choices when exposed to financial concepts that are not often shared with the public. They become paralyzed. Actually, they also say that's too good to be true a lot, right? But they become paralyzed with moving forward or end up moving towards traditional plans that everyone is practicing that will require them to be taxed at a much higher rate. You hit the nail on the head. How can we help people become less afraid of doing something that is away from the herd? I'm just going to hit the nail on the head from my humble perspective. They may experience absolute terror. The power is not in the experiencing the terror and retreating. It's in breaking the terror barrier. It's in walking through it because all of us experience fear. It's a human option. It's an option among, feeling happy, joy, excitement, love, passion. It's just normal. We shouldn't make a big deal out of it. It could be a tool. Fear could be a reminder that, oh my God, there's something I don't understand. I've never experienced before. Remember the growth mindset and then walk into it and say, okay, how do I lean in and understand so I don't hurt self or family, society, etc. But lean in enough to understand and then be able to look and ask the right questions to determine what actually will be in the best interest of my family, myself, my business, society, and then make a decision. Yes, at one time, it was absolutely legal and it was part of the common currency to have slaves in this country, to take Black men and humiliate them, to break up families, to kill off the natives. It was considered to be normal. It was legal. But just because it's normal, it's legal, it's part of the common currency does not mean it's right. So we want to remind you that you get to use your own intellectual faculties. You get to use your heart-mind connection, your unconscious, your subconscious emotional mind. You get to act differently accordingly. You get different results as a result of different actions based upon new set of habits. You can't get to where you want to go if where you want to go is different by doing the same thing you've always done. So I just say, feel fear, embrace it. Maybe the best opportunity you have at that moment in time. You want to add to that, Dr. Kwende?
Yeah, I actually I love what he said, and I like the way the question that Tomoko asked. How can we help people become less afraid of doing something that is
Mhm,
away from the herd?
mhm,
The truth is, they have to have my job is to help people see where they truly are.
mhm,
So let's say somebody were to have a job, which most people do. I have to ask them the right question. Do you own your own business, or are you working at someone else's pleasure? Usually they're going to answer the question, I'm working at someone else's pleasure.
mhm.
Eh, Every time I've had someone answer that question, they go like, shoot, like, did I just say that? Yes, you did. You just told me working at someone else's pleasure, right?
Mhm,
Guess what? All of a sudden, they don't like the job anymore, even though they thought it was everything, right? Are you financially where you wanted to be at this point in your life? Usually the answer is no. So this is my point. Most people are not where they need to be. They are just coming because of their understanding of where they are. Our job is to help them raise their awareness. We have to dispel them to the reality of where they are for them to start asking for the right stuff. So if I can get someone to see for real where they are, which is usually not very well, then they want something different. But that's the job I have to do.
mhm, mhm.
So it's not about them not understanding, it's about me helping them know what they need to know so they can make the right decision for themselves. And I know this for a fact. And I tell everyone it before I start, if you know what I know, I can predict exactly what you're going to do.
Ah, yep. And that's the power of having the right leadership exposure, having individuals in your life who have already been there, done that, independent of whether they look like us, they talk like us, they've been in the same environments like us, etc. If you've got the persons who've achieved what you want to achieve, done it well. And yes, they've had hiccups along the way, they've had failures along the way. They can teach us those to avoid those. And more importantly, we can focus in on the right solutions. And then you get to choose. You never lose your ability to choose. That's the powerful aspect of being human. We get to decide. We get to amass information, use our critical thinking faculties. And if we've not developed them in no time, there's no problem. There's plenty of time to develop them. Now, wow. So we want you to have knowledge. We want you to have protection. We want you to understand the power of investments. And we want you to jumpstart it now, not later. What do you want to share as kind of an ending statement, Dr. Kwende? Or I should say a beginning statement for many people.
Well, I think that the graphic that you brought up about the wealth equation is very, very critical for every one of us, right? I'm supposing everyone wants some life success, right? That's kind of why we live, to make a difference, to leave a difference when we live, right? And so, legacy planning, retirement planning, long-term care planning, college planning, financial planning, where all of this starts is what about each one of us having a basic financial health check. So one of the things that we offer to anyone is what to get them started correctly. You need to do a financial health check so you can see where you are in all of these areas. And then we can develop a plan together, all complementary to help you get to where you need to go. But you have to get started. They say that you have to course correct. You cannot course correct when you are not on the course. You have to start, then you course correct as you go. We have to get started first, though.
Absolutely. And we're just appreciative that you've chosen to leverage Lead Live to go deep, to gather some of the fundamentals. We're less concerned about you knowing it all yesterday, and we don't want you to be overwhelmed and say, gosh, I didn't know any of that stuff. We want you to systematically leverage what you do know and make the shifts. Leverage us, leverage us, leverage us. And I love to say leverage now that I know that for Jerry, that is one of his favorite words. And he writes, a problem is that too many are not educated on 401k and many, many other things that they're doing because the herd does that. The herd's been encouraged to leverage those different products. And when they get offered those things at work, especially, there's usually no formal education tied to it. And in fact, the HR that is offering has no clue what they're offering, and the worker has little idea of what they're getting. How is it even possible when you're talking about someone's financial future? Folks, a lot of things are happening in our daily lives. And that question, that seminal question at the end that Jerry posed, how is it possible when you're talking about someone's financial future? As Dr. Kwende just reminded us of those fundamental planning areas, you don't have financial understanding and planning in place, you're not likely to get to that, experience the vision that you have, experience the protection, the safety, the passing it, the torch. We want you to do exactly what you envision you'd like to do. Please leverage, leverage, leverage. Well, Dr. Kwende, thank you again for another valuable opportunity to share with the Lead Live audience.
Thanks, Dr. Webb. I appreciate all the time you put into making this happen. And it's amazing the number of people that are going to be impacted by this today and for the very near future.
Yeah, and I want to those of you who were expecting Lead Live to be on the classic day of Wednesday at noon, Pacific Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We resume that next week. This week was a bit odd and for a reason, so we appreciate you bearing with us. The most important thing is these presentations are always available. They're uploaded to LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and they're accessible by way of Roku TV and Amazon TV. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And everyone needs to know the rules of the game they're playing. You are both awesome, and let's make this go viral. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you so much. And most importantly, let's do what edifies all of us. Why don't?
Thank you.